The 2016 Republican Party presidential candidate, as he then was, Donald Trump, had taken every opportunity on the campaign trail to talk about going to Washington to drain the swamp, in quotes. That was interpreted by many political analysts across the world as a euphemism for disrupting the norm in American politics. At that time, it sounded like a sentiment that syncs so well with most Americans who felt that the government had become unnecessarily beholden to multinationals and other corporate interests to the detriment of the citizens. Fast forward to 2020, and the same Donald Trump, president for the past 4 years, is orchestrating the biggest and perhaps most unimaginable soap opera in American history by refusing to concede defeat. After being so soundly trounced by the Democratic Party challenger, Joe Biden, in a presidential election, how true does this ring when compared to what has become the norm in the African democratic experience? And what lessons could be drawn from what's happening in the U.S. for African leaders? What does this election standoff hold in the prospect of world peace? We're now being joined by Akin Osuntokun, political scientist, strategist, researcher, administrator, journalist, and writer. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good to have you on the program. Well, very quickly, we've been discussing the American elections. What lessons do you think that Africans can learn from that electoral process so far, even if at some point we were saying that election looks too African and that President Trump has been behaving like an African potentate?
Well, you know, there is something that is called the Barry Goldwater rule. It's actually in the American Constitution. So the issue that has arisen, I mean, the rule had to do with whether or not to subject aspirants to office, presidential aspirants, to a psychiatric test. So, you know, so it's not as if it is new, the behavior or the queer or arbitrary behavior of President Trump and potential Trumps, you know, have not been, has not arisen in the U.S. before. Look, before Trump assumed office, he had exhibited a kind of many personality traits that are, you know, to put it mildly, are controversial. And so what he is doing now is consistent with the kind of behavior, the personality defect he has exhibited before he became president. What has happened is that because of the position, because of the magnitude of power and the position that he holds now, those shortcomings really psychiatrically, mentally, you know, has become, they've become so, you know, magnified and disturbing. So, and more or less, America, you know, and by means of that, the world is being held to ransom by a man who is exploiting, you know, the infrastructure of democracy, the Constitution, to hold the society to ransom. This is the, for me, this is the crux of, this is the most significant aspect of what is happening now. And that is that, look, American presidents, they do annual medical checkups. I don't see why, in view of what has happened now, that medical checkup should not include a psychiatric evaluation. Look, pilots, professional pilots, are subjected to psychiatric evaluations every 3 months, I think, regularly, you know, because of the delicacy of the assignment that they have, and that, you know, it can result into, you know, sudden tragedy and things like that. So this is my own belief too, that what Trump represents for America is more is actually more than the political impasse that he has created. Technically, you know, even though he's against, acting against the norm of presidential succession, technically he is still within his right in the steps he's purportedly taking. I mean, there is a recourse to law under the Constitution if he comes up with the kind of complaints that he has come up with. The problem with his own case is that they are so obviously implausible that, but again, that is for the legal system to decide. It's embarrassing, it's not, but he's still acting within the constitutional confines and legal reference. So, but it's look, so you have to reconcile two developments here. First is the vulnerability of the American Constitution itself, you know, and the need to pay particular attention to the health of those who assume those kind of high office. You have to recall that as President and Commander-in-Chief of America, Trump is only 8 minutes away from starting a nuclear war. He goes around with a nuclear code in a black portfolio that he carries with him. And if he decides, you know, to, in any case, his niece, who is a clinical psychologist, Mary, I can't recall it. Mary is his sister. I can't readily recall the niece now. But she's a clinical psychologist. And he had just warned that Trump is prone to what you call the Samson syndrome. That if he is going down...
All right, her name is Mary.
Mary Trump, yes.
Mary, you are right.
So that...
And she wrote the book, Too Much and Never Enough.
Exactly.
How my family created the world's most dangerous man.
And that he is vulnerable to the Samson syndrome. And you know the Samson syndrome, you know, and the Delilah story in the Bible. That if Trump, as he knows now that he's going down, he may resolve to bring the society down with him, bring crashing down with him. So this is the magnitude of the problem that, and don't forget that Trump has all along been a minority president. It was a minority of the American electorate that elected him into the office. It was just a constitutional uniqueness of the American Constitution that he came to power. I mean, he was defeated by Hillary Clinton by upwards of 3 million votes, you know, at the last round of the election. So it's people, so it's not as, I mean, to the extent that, you know, you can maybe excuse or, you know, rationalize how he got there in the first place, that he was not elected by the majority of American people. And he holds the record as a president whose popularity approval never went beyond the mid-40s in the history of polling, public polling. And as president, for 4 years, there was never a time that his popularity rating, you know, went beyond the mid-40s. So, but with regards to Africa, there is actually an irony, because the last time we had, President Goodluck Jonathan's behavior in 2015 is exactly the opposite of what Trump is doing now. And so, of course, maybe that is an aberration in Africa. But it has happened here. I mean, that demonstration, a kind of example, you know, or model that has undergirded American, you know, transition, you know, was significantly shown, you know, by President Goodluck Jonathan. But as I said, it is an aberration, so there is a limit to which we can celebrate that. We don't need to get ahead of ourselves. I don't know, it's in Jonathan's character to do what he has done. And if you look at him when he was conceding the presidency, I could see an element of peace, like something, a burden being lifted off his shoulders. A less psychologically balanced person, wouldn't have done what Jonathan did. And of course, Africa is replete with that. The thing that, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but many societies, have suffered the rule of psychopaths. That they are not just bad presidents or violating, but look, if you evaluate them, somebody like Mobutu Sese Seko, and Bokassa, and all these peculiar people. Many of them are psychopaths, but the thing is that once a man is successful or highly successful or in a position of importance or significance, we take it for granted that that kind of person will not be suffering a mental breakdown or lack of mental fitness for high office.
Yeah, but can I just say here, I have also had cause to compare President Trump to Mobutu and other African potentates. But psychopaths succeed in politics and in business because that mental illness is a double-edged sword. That grandiose sense of self-worth, their charm and their persuasiveness helps them get ahead. It's just that, unfortunately, there's the darker aspect of it. But coming to my question, Joe Biden, as you have said, described Trump's behavior as an embarrassment. He's gone ahead to make appointments. But what is the role of his party, the Democrat Party, at this juncture? What should they be doing at this point? And what is the role of the opposition in the event of a sort of sit-tight situation like what we're seeing in America? Bearing in mind that the Democrats did not get the vaunted or much expected blue wave. In fact, the Republicans managed to flip some seats in the House. The Democrats did cling to their majority, but it's a smaller majority. And in the Senate, that majority has not yet materialized. So they don't have the kind of broad mandate that we usually get with American presidents. This is the first time in 32 years that a new president does not have a majority in the House or the Senate. What are the options available to the Democrat Party, and what is the role of the opposition in this kind of situation?
Well, I don't think this is the first time that an elected president has not, in the U.S., has not been elected along with majority.
A new president, yes, for the first time in 32 years. It is the first 32 years, a new president, the first-term president, as Joe Biden is, or president-elect.
Yeah, okay, there's no need to litigate that. Yeah, the Republicans, the short answer to their behavior is, is political opportunism. And you recall that the president-elect Biden referred to them as being mildly intimidated by Trump. What he means by that is that, the Republican base, they have pushed America into some kind of, especially the Republican Party, into what you call mob democracy. So all of them, Trump has become like a tiger they were riding, and how to get off it, is a problem now. All of them need him, or they need his support in order to seek, to realistically seek elected office. Now look at the people in the Senate runoff election in Georgia. You look at the two presidential candidates who openly were accusing the secretary of the Georgian government that conducted the election in Georgia, who happens to be of the same party, accusing him of, impropriety or getting involved in some kind of electoral malpractice. And when they were asked that, what are the specific allegations, the secretary was asked that, what are the specific allegations they have leveled against him to substantiate that accusation. And he said none. So, but again, they are playing Trump politics. If Trump is saying the election is stolen or fraudulent, many Republicans see it as their obligation to chorus, no matter how, no matter how implausible or embarrassing the statement that whatever is coming from Trump. And look, it's an ugly process, and it has posed as much a problem to the American society as the way you are posing it here. Nobody knows. I mean, if you ask, the short answer all over the America is that they've never seen this kind of thing before. It's mind-boggling, and everybody is just baffled. And of course, it shows that, look, the flaws of politicians can, rise to the level of absurdity anywhere in the world. You've seen people, among the Republican senators. There was a man who specifically said, look, he was taking a position on the nomination approval of a candidate to Supreme Court. And when he was, supporting that, when he was supporting the process at the time, he said that if there is a vacuum for the nominees for a replacement in the Supreme Court, and it happens within an election year, it should be deferred till after the election, when a new president must have been sworn in. And he went on to say that, look, you can quote me. If this sort of position arises in the future, and there's the table, the shoes on, you can quote what I've said. And lo and behold, exactly what he has said that, happened with the nomination and approval of the last seated Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. So you see that it's a pity, but look, as a student of political science, it's something that what we are witnessing in America today actually stands in the logic of the modernization theory on its head. And that a society that has evolved, as a matter of fact, America is a birthplace of constitutional democracy. That a society that has evolved to the level of America cannot be prone, to this kind of behavior, derogatory behavior and subversive behavior that we are seeing among the political elites, in the America.
Okay. Okay, I mean, you said rightly, the man you were trying to make allusions to was Mitch McConnell, actually, one of the leaders of the Republican Party in the Senate that said...
He says Lindsey Graham.
Okay, Lindsey Graham, okay. Okay, but for me, this is it. In all fairness to the Republican Party, not all Republicans, were caught in the whims and caprices of Donald Trump. In fact, there was a bunch of Republicans that went to set up a group called the Lincoln Project. And their mindset and ideology that we need to take our country back, that this is not the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln. In fact, that made Trump lose one of his strong counsel, that was Kellyanne Conway, because Kellyanne Conway's husband was a member of the Lincoln Project. So what would you say about groups like that?
No, you see, the most consequential group of...
I'm still on my question, sir, please, if you'll let me finish. And secondly, I want you to make comparisons between this and what is happening in Africa currently. We don't talk enough about it, which saddens my heart. Ivory Coast. Laurent Gbagbo, after a third term, he's got 94% of the vote. It's been ratified. Now he wants to start meeting with opposition members to validate a travesty. It's happening in Tanzania with the Chama Chama party of Magufuli. He's bamboozled everybody. Tundu Lissu can't even say anything, the opposition leader. Now he's put himself back as president. I mean, are these comparisons very, very painful and shocking enough?
Look, I mean, there's no point reinventing the wheel of what you have said. Look, this is by African standards, or this is quote and unquote normal. This is what we are used to. That's why what President Jonathan did was unique in the context of African politics. But you said something, the most consequential Republican Party leaders today are those in office. In the Senate, House of Reps, in Congress, the governors and other elected officials all over the country. Those are the most important and consequential members of the party. And the party, you take a cue, if you want to describe or come to a conclusion about the behavior of the Republican Party in the U.S. too, those are the people you look at too. People who are out of office, I mean, look, and because they are in a position to correct it, you know, those other people who are not in office, they are not in a position to correct the behavior of Trump. If the Senate Republicans today decide that they are going to tell Trump, or they will come out publicly to accept the result of the presidential election, that will be the end of the post-surning by Trump. So that is to the extent. But the correlation between in Africa, it is more the rule, you know, than the exception. And you know, you mentioned Laurent Gbagbo and things, but you see, it is no news. It's not news. I mean, you know, it's just that. So it's a pity, but that is the reality of our situation. A behavior like the way Trump is behaving, if it's in an African society, it will not be news. I mean, it's expected. It is because you know, it is the least expected, you know, behavior from a model. You know, America actually, as I said, created the first constitutional government in human history, modeling, you know, constitutional democracy. You know, the first president of the U.S., George Washington, after spending 2 terms in office, they asked him to make himself. They wanted to make him a king, you know. Then so he refused. Look, we cannot be challenging, you know, autocracy or royal rulership of Britain, and then we will, you know, assume a similar behavior in the U.S. So he declined, and you know, by that singular decision, you know, also gave a vital, you know, bloodline for the evolution of constitutional democracy in Africa. But as I said, it is because America is a model of that, you know, culture. And of course, it's the most powerful nation on earth. That what America does not stay in America. We are all vulnerable and exposed to the consequences of whatever America does. And the example is what I've given to you. I mean, it's 8 minutes away from starting a nuclear war, which effectively we end the world as we know it, and carries it around. So, but if you look at it with the compulsive behavior of the man, what psychiatrists would call, you know, a pathological liar. You know, I mean, you've had all sorts of, you know, explanations of his behavior, oddities and absurdities, like, you know, alternative facts, alternative reality, and things like that. So it's a pity, but again, at the end of the day, we can take solace in the fact that he is still within his rights. He's still functioning within the constitution and legal order of the America. He has not, it's just that he's violating a norm. You know, a norm, of course, can be as important, if not important, than legislation. But he's still, what is happening now, what he's saying is still with, for instance, the results of the elections have only been called by the media. It has not been certified state by state. You know, after certification, maybe before the end of November, then they are still going to assemble, the delegates of each state are still going to assemble to form what they call the Electoral College. It is the Electoral College that will now elect, formally elect Biden. I mean, with the number of votes he has won. I mean, well, I don't know what, which is 279 as we speak. He requires to be an elected president, you require only 274 votes. Once you cross that threshold, then effectively you have become the president-elect. And this is what the Electoral College will formalize when they meet, I think, late December. So regardless of the, the confusion, the anxiety, the disruption that has been caused by the behavior of, which is consistent with him anyway, the surprise would have been if he has behaved otherwise. But regardless of his inadequacies or the confusion he has caused, they are still acting within the legal process. The legal process has not been exhausted. We should get alarmed. I mean, we will shift to a new phase of the crisis. It may be a phase of catastrophe. If after the Electoral College has elected Biden and he still refuses to leave office, then that will be the time that not only America, but all of us in the world should start worrying.
Well, Osuntokun, let me take you back to where you started from. You talked about the Goldwater Rule, 1964, the election between Goldwater, Barry Goldwater, five-time senator in the United States, and Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson won that 1964 election by a wide margin. But there were concerns, as you pointed out, about Barry Goldwater's mental health because of his shift from conservatism to libertarianism and his shifting positions on the Civil Rights Act. But the American Psychiatrists Association says in Section 7 of their Rules of Ethical Conduct that you don't give a professional opinion on the mental health of political office holders. But I know where you are coming from, because with President Trump, his state of mental health has been a big issue. And when I asked you that original question, I said, in terms of lessons for Africa, are you saying, invariably, that African leaders also need to take mental health checks? And who are those leaders that you currently have in mind that will need to undergo psychiatric examination? That's one leg of it. But in spite of alleged madness of Barry Goldwater, he still went on to establish a legacy and is one of the well-regarded politicians in American history. Is there a possibility that President Trump, with all the things that have been ascribed to him, will end up leaving a very strong legacy? And if so, what do you think will be his legacy?
Well, his legacy is already ruined. He has no. He will be remembered as, according to him, as the worst American president. Even were he to concede today, and he has earned that reputation. There's nothing he can do now to remedy, what he has done. I mean, look, it's like the way he has behaved. He has behaved like the enemy of America. I mean, you see people that, that Russia, who is identified as the most formidable adversary of America, could not have wished for a better president, for a better American president to serve his purpose, which is to sow chaos, which is to destabilize America and its allies. And Trump has gone at it, at a maniacal pace. But for me, as an individual, when I discuss with people, I ask them that, look, because unfortunately and surprisingly, there are many otherwise sane people who still find reason, to canvass or to commend Trump for whatever. Will you like somebody a president, who tell lies on average of 30 times a day as a model for your children? I mean, look, we have a president, I mean, look, parents in America probably will be disabling their TV when he's on air because, and the kind of lies that he tells, they are so egregious and, you know. But back to Africa, but you know that even though I don't think she's the one to make that position. The former chairman of EFCC, Farida Waziri, suggested that because of the humongous nature of corruption, the embezzlement, that look, maybe our leaders, she suggested it should be subjected to psychiatric evaluation because it's an abnormal behavior that if you find somebody, when you find leaders, stealing $1 billion and still going, those questions become pertinent. That what kind of behavior is this? But part of the problem, of course, in our society is like a cyclical problem. It's like a circular problem. An unstable environment, the more unstable an environment is, the more it drives individual anxiety. And those who are in positions of authority are exposed to that anxiety as you and I. And one way people use to respond to this anxiety is maybe individuals who find themselves in position of power want to fortify themselves with as much money as they can steal, so that if anything happens to the country or society, they have enough, to do, leave the country or do whatever they want to do. So, but this is the situation we find ourselves at. But I don't know. It's not as if, of course, that Africa has been static. Africa is making some, steps, maybe 4 steps, in terms of pretending to run constitutional democracy. You ask if I have any current leader in mind that should be a subject of psychiatric evaluation. Well, that's a dangerous question that you're asking. Because if I were to give an honest answer, it wouldn't, I myself, no matter how straight I shoot, find a bit embarrassing. So when we finish this program, Ruben, we will discuss the candidates, for psychiatry that are deemed, patients of psychiatric evaluation. There are many of them, of course, and at the highest levels of government.
Thank you very much, Chief Akin Osuntokun, for joining us on the morning show.